is Grayson Goodman, and welcome to the world issue of War in Afghanistan. Now, war in Afghanistan is a very powerful war. It's been going on for many, many years, more than a decade, almost 2 decades. And now I'm going to describe the beginning of the war in Afghanistan with this bubble map. Now, the first thing to start the war in Afghanistan was actually the assassination of the commander of the Northern Alliance, but we are not talking about that. That will be the next slide. 9/11, probably the most powerful thing that drove the U.S. to the war in Afghanistan. Now, when that happened, President Bush declared that there would be a war on terror. So basically, we are combating terrorism, but there was not just U.S. victims, but United Kingdom victims as well. Approximately 67 of them in the 9/11 attacks, which that creates a minor cause to the war on terror, which the United Kingdom joined. Now, the Taliban reside in Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden leads Al Qaeda and resides in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden has been wanted since 1992. In that case, President Bush demanded that Osama bin Laden hands over the terrorists. Guess what? He did not. He refused that. The United States found that refusal as a delay tactic. And that in turn created a U.S. coalition to hunt for Osama bin Laden. Australia, Germany, and Canada joined that coalition because Osama bin Laden has been wanted since 1992 by the U.S. government, and also the United States started a coalition for the hunt of Osama bin Laden. UK victims and the U.S. war on terror, and the U.S. finds the refusal as a delay tactic, in turn creates the United States and the United Kingdom to invade Afghanistan. And that invasion, with a bunch of connections here, because I forgot in nations, created the war in Afghanistan. Now, here's the Northern Alliance assassination. God, that is really hard to pronounce. Ahmed Shah Massoud, commander of the Northern Alliance, assassinated by Al Qaeda operatives, assassinated on September 9th, 2001, 3 days before the attacks. Down here in the bottom quote, Peter Bergen later calls Massoud's assassination the current razor on the attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. Now, that, if you don't realize that, this is very pivotal. It basically allowed Osama bin Laden to attack the United States 3 days after the commander's assassination. Now, in his killing, or in his death, the world lost a master of guerrilla warfare. He's what kept the Taliban and the Al Qaeda in check. Now, they would not, so that's why they did not control all of Afghanistan, because he was alive. But now he's dead, or he is dead now, but when he was dead, that basically allowed the Taliban to attack, or Al Qaeda to attack. His nickname was the Lion of Panjshir, which I don't know what Panjshir means, but I'm pretty sure it's important, or maybe not. The attack, though, is serious blow to the anti-Taliban resistance, like I said. Now, the experts believe that his assassination assured Osama bin Laden protection by the Taliban. So now Osama bin Laden has even more protection by the Taliban because Massoud is dead. Now, the origins of the Northern Alliance includes its name as the United Islamic Front for the Salvation of Afghanistan. It had received report from Iran, Russia, Turkey, India, and Tajikistan, and others during its counterterrorism against the Taliban and Al Qaeda. The goal of the Northern Alliance was counterterrorism, and it is also a Afghanistan organization. After the Taliban was forced out of Afghanistan, the alliance was dissolved. The 9/11 terrorist origins. 4 plane hijackings on September 11th, 2001. Hijackers from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Lebanon, and Egypt. Flights American Airlines 11 and 77 and U.S. Airlines Flight 93 and 175 were hijacked. All 9/11 terrorists trained at Al Qaeda camps in Afghanistan. Some were trained in flying lessons in the United States, some trained for physical combat for controlling the crowds in the planes. Now the U.S. coalition operations. The first one was Operation Enduring Freedom, or OEF. Official name was used by the U.S. government for the global war on terrorism in Afghanistan. Basically, this thing was started by airstrikes by the United States and by the United Kingdom that I was talking about in slide 2. Now, the operation ranged from 2001 to 2014. Now, that being said, the war had not ended. It was continuing on still. Just this operation had ended, and now a new one started. Operation Freedom Sentinel, which still continues today. Another project for the global war on terrorism. It supports allies and its partners during the war, and I mean U.S. allies. So Afghanistan, military, police, Britain, Australia, Germany, France, and all others. And Italy too. Italy was part of this. Counterterrorism against the remnants of Al-Qaeda to ensure that Afghanistan is never used to stage an attacks on the United States. So basically now the United States is making sure that Afghanistan is never used again as a terrorist, as a center for terrorism. Meant to be used for the Taliban, that has switched to guerrilla tactics and suicide attacks in the winter and early spring of 2018, and it still continues. And the war begins on 7th of October 2001. The U.S. military, with British support, begins bombing campaign against the Taliban forces, launching Operation Enduring Freedom. Canada, Australia, Germany, and France promised future support in the war. Now, Canada, Australia, and Germany were the first three to join, and France promised later. Italy promised even later. And then they all had joined, and they are still in today. The war's early phase involves early airstrikes on Al-Qaeda and Taliban forces. 1,000 U.S. Special Forces were deployed for especially the hunt of Osama bin Laden. The first ground combat forces arrived 12 days later after the start of the war. The first ground no, I already read that. Conventional warfare starts. The ground combat is Taliban versus Afghan opponents. Now, about the airstrikes. The airstrikes have been one of the most toxic political issues in Afghanistan over the past few years. Karzai has long called for the ban on airstrikes. Now, Karzai is the elected president of Afghanistan at this point. He was elected in 2011, or around that area. I cannot remember that. The issue came abroad when the airstrike that targeted Taliban militants in the eastern Logar province. The airstrikes killed 18 civilians in the process. Now, this is an issue because it's killing non-combatants, which is a war crime. It's not. It is actually a pretty big war crime for killing non-combatants along with combatants. It did. Yeah. So, continue on. Guerrilla tactics strategies used by the Taliban and other insurgents. Now, guerrilla tactics are very powerful when you are defending your home, or pretty much just area at this time. During the year alone, there has been 171 attacks used by the Taliban alone, including this month. And definitely terrorist attacks. Bombing, suicide attacks consisted of motor launches, car bombs, street bombs, RPG launches, shootings, grenade attacks, etc. Most attacks were against the foreign soldiers and forces. They were not against civilians at all. I don't know why the Taliban would attack civilians, but that they are just they're there because they're civilians. Some of the attacks consisted of the Taliban insurgents of urging Afghanistan soldiers to attack against the foreign forces. Now, Afghanistan won't do that, or hope they won't, because then that means that we will have to either defend ourselves or attack them because they are attacking our soldiers. But they're not at this point, so that is good. Guerrilla tactics strategies continue. Taliban and insurgents use victims to disguise their bombs. Terrorists continue to find new ways to disguise their bombs using dead bodies. Now, that is very gross, and I do agree. If you are gagging while you're listening to this, have fun, because basically in my mind I am too. The bombs are used for targeting civilians and U.S. soldiers. Bombs are usually 18-liter jugs filled with explosive material, usually C4 or other material. If they you ever use, probably sodium, probably not, but you know. The bombs are usually placed where U.S. troops dismount from their vehicles. So Humvees, tanks, probably not tanks, but just general vehicles in general. That's where they were set. The Taliban used their own victims and other attacks to use them as disguises. Now, casualties of body bombs. The UN claims that IEDs have killed more than 340 civilians, injured more than 600 in the beginning of 2014. That is 940 people that have been injured or killed in the beginning of 2014. That is a lot of people. The war in Afghanistan. We start with the U.S. and the United Kingdom bombing Taliban bases, which in turn the U.S. joined Afghan war. Now, the Afghan Civil War continues from 1996. Yes, this is the war between Afghanistan, or the Northern Alliance, and the Taliban / Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda, because they're two different things. The start of Operation Enduring Freedom from 2001-2014. In turn, the U.S. authorizes raids on militants in Pakistan, which Pakistan denied. Well, they denied that the U.S. should be allowed to do this, but yet the U.S. went anyway because Osama bin Laden is killed. Well, he was killed in Pakistan by U.S. soldiers on the 2nd of May, 2011. So that was a good thing that we actually went in and did it, and went against what Pakistan thought. But now, Operation Freedom Sentinel starts in 2015, and it still continues. The cost of deploying one U.S. soldier is $1 million per year. So now, if you deploy, I don't know, it's a lot of money. $1 million per soldier, and that's not just for paying them actually. Is for the food, for the ammunition costs, for basically everything that the soldier needs. For his transportation too. But that's all covered by the government. The war in Afghanistan is the longest war that the U.S. has been involved in since the Vietnam War. So now this is back in the Vietnam War. Back in 1970 is the start of the Vietnam War, and now we're in 2019, and yet we have broken the record of the longest war we have been involved in. That is not good. That is not good with the Afghanistan war. I definitely don't like that. But you know, hope that record is never broken again in another war, or it's continued with this one. Hopefully it ends soon, because we would like peace. In March of 2019, the United States Department of Defense estimated a fiscal obligations of $737.592 billion have expended during fiscal year 2001 to fiscal year 2018 in Afghanistan at a cost of $3,714 per taxpayer. So now, think of this: your parents paying $3,714 to help with this war, to help the U.S. fight this war. That's a lot of money. I don't know what you can buy with $3,714. I don't even know what I would buy for that much. But you know what? That's okay, because I probably won't have that much money in my life anyway. For fiscal year 2019, the United States Department of Defense requested $46.3 billion for Operation Freedom Sentinel, the U.S.'s code name for war in Afghanistan and related missions. Summations for the United Kingdom contribution for the war in Afghanistan came to £37 billion, or $56.46 billion US dollars. During the war in Afghanistan, that has started from 2001 to present, over 31,000 civilian deaths due to war-related violence have been documented. 29,900 civilians have been wounded. Over 111,000 Afghans, including civilian soldiers and militants, are estimated to have been killed in the conflict. During the September 11 attacks of 2001, 2,977 people were killed, excluding the 19 hijackers, and more than 6,000 were injured. The immediate deaths included 265 on the 4 planes, including terrorists, 2,606 in the World Trade Center and the surrounding area, and 125 at the Pentagon. That is literally almost 3,000 people that had died in less than 6 hours in 9/11, September 11. That is a lot of people. A lot of people, and that is sad too. And last but not least, the war still continues. It is still going on today. The U.S. government does not talk about it much, but it still happens. And have a bibliography. So this is my presentation. Thank you for watching, and I